What's up, guys? Chalk Talks with Coach B back, and I want to continue the discussion about dark pools, but right now, really get into some of the ways that we actually see dark pool abuse and manipulation. And to me, it all starts with the market maker, and that's why I wanted to start off that last video talking about market makers, how they route orders, and kind of explain what a dark pool is. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It was the video I made previously right before this one. But basically, you know, one of the biggest ways, and there's many ways that I think that dark pools are being abused, but one of the biggest ways that retail is getting abused through dark pools, to me, is through having our buy orders routed directly to the dark pool instead of onto the exchange. So imagine this. First off, we should probably start with, the market maker in general. The market maker's duty is to give us the best execution, but at the same time, there are some market makers out there, I don't want to name any names, that also own hedge funds. And while they're not supposed to be interacting with each other during the trading day, they're owned by the same companies ultimately. So if you have a hedge fund who's short a stock that wants a stock to go down and a market maker that's handling order flow, you could see the conflict of interest. Also, at the same time, market makers have the reason to want stocks to be suppressed sometimes, or to bring stock prices up to meet max pain numbers, and that has to do more with options. But there is instances on given weeks where there's high volatility in options on the options chain where a market maker may want to reach a max pain threshold. Like in certain securities, it may be $10 for a week, it may be 180, it may be for $39, but whatever that mark is the mark where the market maker is going to make the most amount of money because they're selling naked calls. So anyways, market makers have the incentive to want to manipulate a price and get it to go to a certain level. So if I'm a market maker and I want to, let's say, drive a stock price down or suppress the upward momentum of a stock, well, some of these market makers handle, let's say, 50% of retail flow a day, right? And I'm trying to make these numbers as simple as possible just to make them easier to understand. I know that's not the exact number, but so let's give a situation on a given security. Let's say there's a stock, and throughout that day, we see retail coming in with 100 million shares worth of buy orders throughout the day. And, throughout the same day, you see the other side of retail or whoever it may be with 100 million worth of shares of sell orders. Well, it doesn't work exactly like this, but that should keep the price, let's say, fairly even, right? For every buy order, there's somebody selling, and you get the picture. So, anyways, pretty much even buy and sell flow order on both sides of the bid ask. So, if this was the scenario, and I'm a market maker and I'm looking to suppress a price, basically what I could do is, and I'm handling 50% of retail, orders coming in that day. That means of that million worth of share buy orders that's coming in on that given stock, I could maybe take 500,000 of them, instead of putting them directly onto the exchange, I could send them into the dark pool. So now, kind of like we discussed before, you're not going to see upward price movement in the stock, right? So, I basically just suppressed half of the buy orders getting routed in that would be moving the stock up. But now on the other end, if I allow, I'm handling 50% of all the sell orders coming in, and I'm supposed to be linking them up. And what I end up doing is putting those directly onto the exchange. Well, now that's going to create downward pressure in the stock without having the buy orders that I sent to the dark pool to even it out. And now you could see why, if you've ever seen a YouTuber or someone on Reddit or anything like that showing that, maybe there was more buy orders or more flow for buy orders coming in on a given stock in a day, even if it's like way outweighs like 80% buys and 20% sells or something like that, but the stock went down. Well, why is that? Probably because a lot of those buy orders are getting sent to the dark pool. Okay, so that's one way that they can suppress a price, is by basically capping that buying pressure, not allowing any buy order flow to come in and drive the price up, but allowing the sell order flow to go into the exchange and drive the price down. Now you might ask, well, what ends up happening? How does that affect what's going on. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, there has to be a if we're trying to buy, right? If I want to buy a stock and I put in a buy order for 100 shares and my buy order gets routed to the dark pool. Well, when it gets to the dark pool, there has to be someone willing to sell me shares on that side, right? Otherwise, um, the market maker basically would have to take on that order for liquidity purposes. So basically, what'll end up happening is if there's no one there that wants to sell me those 100 shares, but he wants it to go through the dark pool, then the market maker has the ability to create fictitious shares. Okay, so he could actually just create and pull 100 shares out of thin air, give them to me. Now they end up in my TD Ameritrade account. I think I bought the stock, but at the same time, really what he did was create a naked short position. And for market makers, this is actually legal. So market makers are the only people that are able to create naked short positions or create naked long positions. Like basically, they have the ability to legally create shares out of thin air for the purpose of creating liquidity. So if there's all these buy orders coming in and people want the shares, and no one's selling them, a market maker has the ability of creating those shares under the understanding that, yeah, you can go take these, go put them in your brokerage account. But by the end of the day, the market maker still needs to have those shares to give to the clearinghouse, right? We talked about that in one of my previous videos, was how a clearinghouse works. So if a market maker was to take all this buy order flow that comes in, push it into the dark pool, to suppress the price from going up, and there's nobody in the dark pool side selling shares, basically now the market maker is going to have to create these shares or, create a naked short position, basically fictitious shares, counterfeit shares for the rest of the day. Now, we talked about this before. What's going to happen at the end of the day? Well, the clearinghouse is going to give, my broker the shares that I bought. And then the clearinghouse is going to now go to the market maker and say, hey, you owe us shares. And now the market maker needs to come up with those. So this is how it works, though, right? I mean, on one hand, what they're doing with this manipulation tactic is driving the price down. So if they're selling me shares, fake shares at $10, and now they're routing all of the negative pressure, the selling pressure through the exchange, that's going to drive the price down. So maybe if I'm able to buy these shares at 10 and throughout the day they're manipulating the price lower, well, at the end of the day, right before the market close, they might be able to go in and now accumulate those shares at the lowest point, let's say even at $9.50. Not only did they just make 50 cents, they also got their accumulated shares that they could turn over to the clearinghouse at the end of the day. Well, what if it works against them? Okay, because that's also a scenario. Because again, every market maker, they don't account for the whole market. There's plenty of market makers out there. And if I'm one market maker that's trying to suppress the price, I might be doing this dark pool flow where I send buy orders in and, put the sell orders into the market. But there might be other market makers out there that are just allowing the buy pressure to go in. And maybe I'm wrong and maybe I lose and the stock marches up. So now I sold these fictitious shares for $10 to somebody, at a specific brokerage, but the stock price went up, so now it's the end of the day, and now I sold these shares for 10, and if I want to get them back, I have to go in and maybe buy them for $10.50. So now I'm out 50 cents a share. Well, the market maker has another option, right? Failure to deliver. So when the clearinghouse comes asking like, hey, you owe us shares at the end of the day, well, they could just not have them and take that FTD, which we talked about previously. And because they're a market maker and they're given all this extra leeway, basically at the end of the day, they get 35 days to now come up with these shares. And there's plenty of instances out there. I mean, if people say, well, how do you know this happens? You're making this. I mean, do your research. I mean, there's been plenty of market makers. You look through some of the big name ones, they've been fined multiple times for the same exact thing I'm talking about. And then even when it comes to the end of the day at the T35 and they have to come up with them, if they fail to do that, they get hit with a fine. But at the end of the day, if they're routing, let's just say, in my example, 500,000 shares, right? And just to make it easy, they stand to lose a dollar because the share price went from 10 to 11. So now all of a sudden they stand to lose, $500,000, or even if we, make it even higher, they stand to lose 5 million. Well, it'd be worth them to take that fine, right? Like FTD it, have it go out, kick the can down the road 35 days. And then at the end of the time, if they what they really want to do is within that 35 days, find a time when the price is trading lower. So now when they can get the price in at 9, maybe they can get it at 9.50. Shit, for that matter, maybe they could just get it at 9.99 and make a penny. All they're trying to do is get better price action, and typically it works for them because of the suppression and the manipulation that they're doing. But even when it works against them, they still have this failure to deliver out that they get. And like I said, if I'm this market maker and I'm doing these kind of illegal manipulative tactics, and now I take the FTD route, and then I don't do that, and then what? End of the day, I get a fine, and I made $5 million, or I saved $5 million by not delivering these shares, and let's say my fine is 100 grand. Well, yeah, I mean that's the kind of the cost of doing business, and I think that's part of the problem of what we see. So, anyways, I hope that makes sense. That's one way that I've seen in the past and kind of read about, and just seen through some of the good DD online, and just articles I've read in the past on how market makers themselves, who I think in the grand scheme of things are the root of the problem, because they're the ones who have the ability to route retail orders. So if they want to really saw retail off and not create retail buy pressure, that's the biggest way they could do it, is by routing the buys into the dark pool, and then routing the sells straight into the exchange to create that uneven movement. There's plenty of other ways. We'll get into those in some of the other videos that I'm going to make. But, some people might ask, okay, well, what can I do, to basically to prevent this from happening as retail? If I want to place a buy order and I want to make sure that my buy order goes straight onto the exchange, is there anything that I could do? Well, there are certain exchanges that don't go through the dark pool. I know one that I read about in the past was IEX, I think was the name of it. But basically, it comes down to who your broker is. So certain brokers, they give you the ability to route your own orders. Like, if you just go for like best execution, basically what that means is they're going to give it to a market maker to go give you the best execution. But as I just laid out, we can't always trust market makers, right? So if you're trading in a highly manipulated stock and you're afraid that that might be happening, make sure you have a broker that gives you the ability to choose how to route it. And I mean, I can't really go through this and tell you how to do it with every single broker, because I'm sure every single one is different. But I know, like in my Charles Schwab app, I go in there, and when I'm putting my actual order in the advanced order entry options, there's a place where I could pick the destination. And one of those is EX, and that's actually that IEX exchange, which supposedly is not going to route it to a dark pool. But there's plenty of other ones out there, and I mean that's something where if you really wanted to do your own thing on it, you'd have to maybe research into your own broker, maybe get them on the phone and ask them, hey, I want to put these buy orders in, but I don't want them routed to a dark pool. How do I go about doing that? And see what they say. And if you do that, maybe throw it in the comments, because I'd love to hear what they say. Anyways, have a great night. This is the like the first of many videos I'm going to be doing on the different types of dark pool manipulation that are out there. If you didn't watch the previous videos and you're kind of wondering what I'm talking about in terms of like what's a market maker, what do you mean order routing, all that kind of stuff, watch those earlier videos. That's why I put those out there first, so you can kind of understand the market dynamic and how this stuff works. I'll be doing more. If I'm glossing over something or there's something that I'm saying that you don't understand, absolutely shoot me a comment below. Also, if you're like, man, I'm tired of hearing about dark pools, I want to hear about XYZ, leave it in the comments and I'll go through and do it. I hope I'm making sense. I'm trying to simplify this stuff as best as possible and make it easily understandable for everybody. And that's why I'm trying to pick very small topics and expand them into shorter videos. But either way, have a good evening. If you want to check me out tomorrow, I will be streaming from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., answering questions like these, as well as watching some of the stocks that I'm into. This is Chalk Talks with Coach B. Have a good night.